I'm commenting on section 3, part 1 of that section, and I was just going to say that there's a lot of allusions towards the eyes throughout that section as well as the rest of the book, and that's used only in parts with Darcy and Elizabeth to show their affection towards each other, and it just subtly shows the love that they have is growing because it's used more and more often during that section, especially than throughout the rest of the book.
Good job. All right, we are moving on to group number 2, and there they are. All right. No, you can keep it on. But whoever's going to speak, keep that near you.
But what if you had a comment on the previous thing that after
You can still comment on the other group if you want.
I was gonna say that like eyes are like the windows of the soul. So when they keep referencing the eyes and the illusions, it's actually talking about the soul, and they can actually see that they are beginning to feel for another. Okay, that's it.
Cool.
Then still.
All right.
So we're summarizing up Volume 3, Chapter 4,
Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice.
So jump in, guys.
The excerpt that I chose was from the letter that Mr. Collins wrote to the Bennets. No arguments shall be wanting on my part that can alleviate so severe a misfortune, or blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to read it because that would take too much time. However, I'm just going to point out, first of all, Mr. Collins is just outright pointing that the Bennets would probably rather have Lydia die than get married. Charming to the last, Collins. Jokes aside, though, the structural integrity of Mr. Collins' letter is he starts out, first and foremost, getting his grievances for the Bennets out of the way. But he does it very briefly, like, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry that this happened, you know, this must be very bad for you. But then he goes right to, okay, how is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect my wife? How is this going to affect the Catherines? He's not saying this is why it affects you and this is why it affects me. He's saying this is how it affects you, but this is how it affects me. The way that it's structured, it really doesn't make Mr. Collins a good person in our light. Just from the way that his grievances are ordered.
So how does it relate to the author's purpose?
The author's purpose, obviously, is to characterize Collins as a not a likable character.
He's just doing this through Darcy and Elizabeth and the letter that Collins actually wrote himself.
Why do we not want to see Collins in a good light?
Well,
I feel like the author tried to characterize Mr. Collins as he looks out for him and his family before everything else, and before anybody else.
should I hand the mic over to them?
Yeah. Dissension. We have dissension here. Keep speaking.
I think he is characterized as he is to show that he looks out for not quite his family, but Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who he's not even related to, more so because she's of higher rank and status. So he wants to get on her good side, but in doing that, he just makes himself look like a complete retard.
And so what's the author's purpose in that?
And the author's purpose in that is to stay with the neoclassical views of how society is supposed to be broken up into classes, and it makes the book unpleasant for us to read because that's not how we view society today.
Contrast with today, that makes sense. Right, thank you. Any other comments on this? Why does the author, I'm sorry, I'm not in there. Why does the author make Collins look so bad? I mean, how is he a foil? How is he a foil of Elizabeth? I mean, he would be an extreme foil of Elizabeth, so would Lady Catherine, but. Who thinks for herself? Elizabeth thinks for herself. Collins doesn't think for himself. He thinks so much to fit in the system, right? Okay, does your group have anything else? That was the end of your group? Okay, we're going to move on to group 4, which has 5 people. All right, so go for it. I'm going to focus the camera on you in a second.
What about group? No, we don't have a group 3. Aha. Oh, we're not. We don't. Does it go right here? Do I just hold it there? Okay, Corey's got it.
Okay, go for it, people. Tell us what your topic, like what's going on in this section.
Do you want us to tell you what section it is, and then? Okay. So this is from Pride and Prejudice, section 3. Ours is part 4.
What's going on in part 4?
Austen is contrasting Lydia and Wickham's relationship and Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's relationship with Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship to make theirs, Darcy and Elizabeth, seem more valid, I guess, and the other two to be more ridiculous. Do you want to talk about the Bennets?
Yeah, I thought that the Bennets were also being contrasted here in this section, particularly Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet. For example, there was a quote earlier in this section where it pretty much showed that Mrs. Bennet really didn't care for who her daughters were marrying, more so that they were just marrying above their class, trying to better them, where Mr. Bennet later in that section got into the argument with Mrs. Bennet about how neither Lydia or Wickham will be welcome at their house. And what I took from that was, well, there's also other things around that particular quote, but what I thought from that was that he cares more for the happiness of his daughters more than his wife, Mrs. Bennet. He cares for the happiness of his family, and more particularly not like Mrs. Bennet. She cares for that they're marrying above their social class. He cares that they marry for who makes them happy, and the fact that she did that made him angry at her for that. So that's what I felt, that they're contrasting the complete differences between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet there.
So do we see a pattern here? What is Austen trying to highlight that is valuable? You said it. It's not the system, it's the individual, right? And so it's not the system, it's the individual. And so the character, the quality of the character, the quality of life. All right. Anything else from your group? There should be more,
Well,
probably.
yeah, there probably should be. What do you want?
Is there anything more?
Well, Dave, did you say story of my life?
No?
These negative comments, Chase. I swear.
Waste the time. Let's move
Freak out.
We talked about Elizabeth and Darcy and how they are, we talked about Elizabeth and Darcy and how they are the best matched couple, and that the contrast between Lydia and Wickham and the Bennet parents show how well matched they are compared to the others, and that their relationship is the healthiest, I guess.
Any support for that?
I have an excerpt about Elizabeth, how it says, she begins now to comprehend that he was exactly the man who, in disposition and talents, would most suit her. Yeah.
I've got to pass the mic on. And with that, right after they say that, they talk about Lydia and Wickham's relationship and how it's built on their passions and they're stronger than their virtues. So it's directly talking about how Elizabeth respects Darcy and they fit each other, while Lydia and Wickham are just crazy people, kids getting married for no good reason, really, just because they want to. They're not built on sound. Elizabeth and Darcy are the only people who are built on sound, respect, and all sorts of other good virtues when marrying somebody.
So we should probably be looking for the role of emotions, and emotions have their purpose, to a certain degree, and they're valuable and valid to a certain extent, except for when they get really extreme, like Lydia and Wickham, or Mrs. Bennett. So we do see that there are limits. So it's not just black and white, obviously. Anything else from your group? Okay, let's go on to group number 5, or section 5. Who is that? Okay. Here we go. All right. So introduce your section, what's going on in there? Come on, move it, guys. Pride and Prejudice, section 3. Keep going.
So this is Pride and Prejudice, section 5, and what's happening is Lady Catherine and Elizabeth are basically having a little battle between each other because Catherine doesn't want Darcy and Elizabeth to get married. And so we thought in this section, like, Lady Catherine's, like, really out of control at this point. She's saying things like, my character's ever been so celebrated for its sincerity and frankness, and in a cause of such manner as this, I shall not depart from it. But then she does the exact opposite of that, and she has no sincerity. She's just being very rude to Elizabeth with no backing at all. And Elizabeth starts sassing back. She says, but you are not entitled to know mine, nor will such a behavior as this induce me to be explicit. She's almost talking to her like she's a little child. And this kind of breaks down the whole neoclassical system because we're supposed to like Lady Catherine because she's a higher power, but we don't because of how she acts. And instead, we like Elizabeth because of her character over her class.
Excellent, excellent. That's some of the best I've heard so far. Nice. Anything else from your group?
There's a bit of irony in this section, such as when Elizabeth is talking to Lady Catherine, and in response to Lady Catherine asking Elizabeth about Darcy's liking her, she says, your ladyship has declared it impossible. And this sarcastic statement makes Lady Catherine seem foolish because she keeps going back on what she's saying.
Yeah. So anything that's illogical is not going to be good, you know. Did you notice the use of the third person?
Yeah.
Did you?
Mhm.
Can you comment on that?
Well, she says it like that adds to the sarcasm, like how she says, your ladyship, like rather than saying, like, you have declared it impossible. She
Okay.
makes it seem
So
like...
she's a caricature of, she's a representation of a type, not a person.
Yeah, she's kind of mocking her.
And there's third person when Lady Catherine talks about herself. My character has all this, or something like that. She doesn't say I, but you don't have to. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get, is there anything else you want to say?
An argument between Elizabeth and Lady Catherine occurs earlier in the book in chapter 6 of part 2, when she is grounding, Lady Catherine is grounding Elizabeth upon her person and how she has grown up and how poorly they were raised. And Elizabeth kind of just sat there then and just kind of answered the questions, but now Jane Austen allows her to grow, and it shows her talking back to a higher class rank and not she's not really paying attention to Lady Catherine's rank anymore. She just looks at her as a person instead of just being there, and she'll argue back as if she is one of her, and she has outgrown her self-pride and her prejudice, and it just shows her growing as a character rather than...
Lady Catherine? Yeah. Cool. We are getting to the end of our 15-minute segment, so I'm just going to stop it.